You don't belong in there, sweetheart. The cleaning crew waits until everyone deplanes." That was the last thing Richard Sterling said before he made the biggest mistake of his career. He thought he was just blocking a woman he deemed suspicious from the cockpit. He thought he was protecting his airline. But he didn't know that the woman standing in front of him, Captain Jordan Banks, wasn't just a pilot. She was the one holding the match that was about to burn his entire corrupt operation to the ground. This isn't just a story about discrimination. It's about the moment arrogance met a force of nature and the $40 million lawsuit that followed. Buckle up. You are not ready for this landing. The fluorescent lights of Chicago O'Hare's Terminal 3 hummed with that specific, headache-inducing frequency that only exhausted travelers seem to hear. It was 5:45 p.m. on a Tuesday, the witching hour for international departures. Captain Jordan Banks adjusted the strap of her leather flight bag on her shoulder. She wasn't in uniform. She was wearing a sharp, slate-gray blazer, dark jeans, and loafers. To the untrained eye, she looked like a business traveler, maybe a tech consultant or a lawyer. But inside her bag was a crisp uniform for Sovereign Airways, 4 stripes on the epaulets, and an ID badge that granted her access to the most secure areas of the aviation world. She was deadheading, flying as a passenger to get to London, where she was scheduled to pilot a return flight on a Boeing 787 Dreamliner the next evening. But Flight 441 to Paris, her connecting hub, was overbooked. As a senior pilot, she had requested the jump seat, the spare seat inside the cockpit behind the active pilots. It was standard protocol. She approached the podium at gate K12. The line was long, the passengers agitated. Behind the counter stood Richard Sterling. Richard was the lead gate agent for Sovereign Airways at O'Hare. He was a man who wore his polyester uniform like it was a suit of armor. He had a reputation, whispered among the junior staff, as a petty tyrant who treated the boarding gate like his own personal kingdom. He was mid-50s, with thinning hair combed severely to the side and a face that seemed permanently set in a sneer. Jordan waited until the passenger in front of her, a confused elderly man trying to scan a coffee receipt instead of a boarding pass, was shooed away by Richard. "Next," Richard barked, not looking up. "Good evening," Jordan said, her voice calm, possessing that specific, measured cadence pilots use to soothe nervous flyers. "I'm Captain Jordan Banks. I'm listed for the jump seat on Flight 441 to Paris. I just need to verify my credentials with the captain." Richard froze. He didn't type. He didn't check the screen. He just slowly raised his head. He looked at Jordan. He looked at her natural hair, pulled back in a professional bun. He looked at her skin. He looked at her casual clothes. Then he let out a short, incredulous huff of air. "The jump seat," Richard repeated, his tone dripping with a sugary, condescending venom. "Is that right?" "That's right," Jordan said, reaching into her blazer. "Here is my crew ID and my FAA certification." She placed the plastic cards on the high counter. Richard didn't touch them. He stared at her, his eyes narrowing. "Look, miss," Richard said, loud enough for the business class passengers nearby to hear. "I don't know what kind of scam you're running, or if you bought a fake ID off the internet to try and snag a free trip to Europe, but I don't have time for it. Step aside." Jordan didn't blink. She was used to friction. She had been flying for 20 years. She had flown cargo into Kabul. She had landed heavily damaged jets in typhoons in the Philippines. A rude gate agent was turbulence she could ride out. "Mr. Sterling," she read his name tag. I advise you to swipe the badge. It will pull up my employee file, my seniority number, which is likely higher than yours, and my authorization for this flight. I am essential crew for a flight out of Heathrow tomorrow. If I don't get on this plane, that flight cancels. Don't you threaten me? Richard snapped, his face flushing a blotchy red. He grabbed her ID. Not to scan it, but to inspect it like a piece of evidence in a murder trial. He bent it slightly. He scratched the hologram with his thumbnail. This looks cheap, he muttered. The lamination is peeling. It's 2 years old, Jordan said. Swipe the card. I'm not swiping anything, Richard said, tossing the ID back onto the counter with a clatter. It slid off the edge and fell to the floor. The sound of the plastic hitting the industrial carpet seemed to silence the immediate area. A few passengers gasped. A young woman in a hoodie pulled out her phone and started recording. Jordan looked at her ID on the floor, then back at Richard. Pick it up, Jordan said. Her voice had dropped an octave. It was no longer the polite request of a colleague. It was a command. Security, Richard yelled, looking over Jordan's shoulder. I have a non-compliant passenger attempting to breach a secure area. She's becoming aggressive. Jordan took a deep breath. She bent down, picked up her ID, and dusted it off. She knew exactly what was happening. She had seen men like Richard before. They fed on reaction. They wanted her to scream, to make a scene, to give them a reason to use their power. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. You are making a mistake. Richard, she said softly. The only mistake was you thinking you could walk onto my plane. Richard sneered. You don't look like a pilot. You look like you should be asking for an upgrade to Economy Plus, not the cockpit. Now get out of my line before I have you banned from the airline. Jordan pulled out her phone. She didn't call customer service. She didn't call her husband. She opened the Sovereign Airways Internal Operations app, an app only accessible to high-level staff. She saw the crew list for Flight 441, Captain Lawrence Larry. Halloway. Jordan's eyes narrowed. She knew Larry. They had flown together 5 years ago. He was old guard, a bit lazy, but usually fair. Call Captain Halloway, Jordan said. Tell him Jordan is at the gate. Richard laughed. It was a cruel, barking sound. Oh, you know names. You probably saw it on the monitor. I'm not disturbing the flight crew for a delusional fan. TSA is on their way. Jordan checked her watch. 5:52 p.m. Departure was in 38 minutes. If she didn't get on, the domino effect would cost the airline thousands. But more importantly, Richard had crossed a line that had nothing to do with schedules and everything to do with dignity. Fine, Jordan said. She stepped out of the line, but she didn't leave. She stood by the window, looking out at the Boeing 777 parked at the jet bridge. She looked at the nose gear, and that's when she saw it. From her angle, through the terminal glass, she could see the front landing gear struts. A small, dark pool was forming on the tarmac beneath the nose wheel. It was subtle. Most people would think it was just water or oil from a ground vehicle. But Jordan knew the viscosity of hydraulic fluid. She knew exactly what a slow leak in the nose gear steering actuator looked like. She looked back at Richard, who was now laughing with a business-class passenger, pointing at her and shaking his head. Karma, Jordan thought, is about to arrive ahead of schedule. 2 TSA officers arrived on Segway scooters, weaving through the crowd. Richard waved them over dramatically, pointing a finger at Jordan like she was a fugitive. That's her, Richard declared. His chest puffed out. She's impersonating a pilot. Tried to force her way into the cockpit. I want her trespassed from the terminal. The lead TSA officer, A tall man named Officer Miller approached Jordan. He looked tired. "Ma'am, I need to see your ID and boarding pass." Jordan handed him her pilot certificate and her airline ID. Miller looked at them. He looked at the hologram. He took a small UV light from his pocket and shone it on the card. The hidden Sovereign Airways logo glowed neon blue. Miller looked at Richard. "This is real. Rick, she's a pilot." Richard's face twitched. "It's a good fake. Look at her. Does she look like she flies a 777? She's probably a flight attendant who stole a badge." "I am a senior captain on the 787 fleet," Jordan said, her voice ice cold. "And officer, if you check your system, you'll see I'm cleared for the secure identity display area." Miller nodded. "She checks out, Rick. If she's listed for the jump seat, she's allowed on. Not on my flight." Richard doubled down. His ego was too far committed now to back down. He crossed his arms. "The captain has final authority on who enters the cockpit, and I know Captain Holloway. He doesn't like distractions." "Then let's ask him," Jordan said. At that moment, the jet bridge door opened. A pilot emerged, looking for a coffee refill before boarding finished. It was Captain Larry Holloway. He was a large man, silver-haired, with a face flushed red from years of high blood pressure and steak dinners. "What's the hold-up?" Richie Holloway boomed. "We're trying to push back on time here." "Larry!" Richard shouted, smiling like a co-conspirator. "This woman here is harassing the staff. Claims she knows you. Claims she's a pilot. I told her to beat it. But she's got the cops involved now." Holloway squinted at Jordan. He took a sip of his coffee. He looked her up and down, but there was no recognition in his eyes. When they had flown together years ago, Jordan had been a first officer, and her hair had been different. Or maybe, to men like Holloway, she was just invisible until she made a mistake. "I don't know her," Holloway said, shrugging. "And we're full up, sweetheart. Jump seat is full of bags. Crew luggage." "Crew luggage?" Jordan asked, stepping forward. "Captain Holloway, putting luggage in the jump seat when a credentialed pilot needs to deadhead is a violation of the union contract. Article 4, Section 2. Holloway bristled. He didn't like being quoted regulations by a woman in a blazer. "Listen, lady, I don't care what the contract says. It's my ship. I say who rides. And I don't like your attitude. You're denied. Richie, get her out of here." Holloway turned his back on her and started walking back to the jet bridge. "Larry," Jordan called out, "if you walk back onto that plane, you're going to regret it." Holloway stopped. He turned around slowly. "Is that a threat?" "It's a professional courtesy," Jordan said. She pointed out the window. "You have a hydraulic leak on your nose gear. Steering actuator, looks like. If you push back, you're going to lose steering control on the taxiway. Best case, you get towed back. Worst case, you lose hydraulic system A on takeoff." Holloway laughed. It was a deep, belly laugh. Richard joined in, a hyena-like cackle. "Did you hear that?" "Richie." Holloway wiped a tear from his eye. "She's a mechanic now, too. Looking out the window at a puddle of water and telling me how to fly my bird." Holloway stepped close to Jordan, invading her personal space. "Let me tell you something. I've been flying since before you were born. I did my walk around. The plane is fine. You're just mad because you got caught trying to scam a free ride. Go home." He turned and disappeared down the jet bridge. Richard smirked at Jordan. "You heard the captain. Get lost. Or do I need to have Officer Miller cuff you?" The crowd was watching. The phones were recording. The humiliation was total. Jordan stood there, the eyes of 100 strangers burning into her. They thought she was a fraud. They thought she was crazy. But Jordan didn't feel shame. She felt a shift, a cold, hard gear clicking into place in her mind. She looked at Richard. "I'm not going home, Richard, and neither are you." She turned to Officer Miller. "Officer, I need to make a phone call, and I suggest you don't let that plane push back." "Ma'am, I can't stop a plane based on your hunch," Miller said apologetically. "It's not a hunch," Jordan said, unlocking her phone. She didn't dial the crew scheduling desk. She didn't dial the chief pilot. She dialed a number that very few people had. "Who are you calling?" Richard asked, sensing a change in the atmosphere. He saw the way she stood, shoulders back, chin high, the stance of someone holding all the aces. "I'm calling the FAA Regional Flight Standards District Office," Jordan said, holding the phone to her ear. "And then I'm calling Arthur Pendleton." Richard's face went pale. "The CEO." "You don't know the CEO." "Actually," Jordan said, her eyes locking onto Richard's as the line connected. "He's the one who hired me 3 weeks ago to clean up this exact mess. You didn't check the updated staff directory, did you?" "Richard, directory," Richard stammered. "I'm not just a captain," Jordan said, her voice clear and loud enough for the camera phones to pick up. "As of the 1st of this month, I am the new Vice President of Flight Operations for Sovereign Airways, which means, Richard, I'm your boss." She spoke into the phone. "Arthur, it's Jordan. We have a situation at O'Hare. I'm grounding Flight 441, and I'm going to need a new gate lead immediately." The silence at gate K-12 was deafening. Richard Sterling's mouth opened. But no sound came out. It was a goldfish-like gape, a silent testament to a brain that had just driven off a cliff. The phone in Jordan's hand was still connected. "Yes." "Arthur," Jordan said into the receiver, her eyes never leaving Richard's face. "I'm at gate K-12. You have the live feed." "Good. I'm declaring a code red on Flight 441, operational hazard, and I want the station manager down here. Now." She hung up. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the nervous shuffling of the passengers who had just witnessed the exchange. The young woman with the hoodie was still filming, zooming in on Richard's sweating forehead. You can't be," Richard whispered, his voice cracking. "The VP of Ops is a man. Mr. Henderson. Mr. Henderson retired 2 weeks ago after the Denver incident," Jordan said, stepping closer to the counter. She placed her hands flat on the surface, leaning in. "I was brought in to clean house, to fix the culture of arrogance and negligence that has plagued this hub. And Richard, you are the poster child for everything I was hired to destroy." Richard scrambled for the computer. His fingers trembled over the keyboard. I didn't know. I'll print your boarding pass. I'll upgrade you. First class. Seat 1A. It's open. Just please, don't file a report." "It's too late for a boarding pass," Jordan said calmly. "I told you. The flight is grounded." "But they've already closed the door," Richard stammered, pointing out the window. "The jet bridge is pulling back." Jordan looked. He was right. The accordion-like tunnel was retracting from the fuselage of the Boeing 777. The tug vehicle was already clamped to the nose gear, ready to push the massive aircraft back onto the taxiway. "Then we stop them," Jordan said. She grabbed the PA microphone from behind the counter. Richard tried to reach for it, but Officer Miller, the TSA agent, stepped in front of him, his hand resting casually on his belt. Miller gave Jordan a nod. He had seen enough gate agents abuse their power. He was enjoying the show. Jordan keyed the mic, but not for the terminal. She punched in the code for the ramp control frequency, a direct line to the ground crew and the cockpit, overriding the boarding music. Flight Deck 441, this is Sovereign Operations. Verify blockage, Jordan said. Her voice boomed not just at the gate, but inside the aircraft cabin and the cockpit speakers. There was a crackle of static. Then Captain Holloway's voice, sounding annoyed. Operations, this is 441. We are buttoned up and ready for push. Who is this? We're off the gate. This is Captain Jordan Banks, Acting Director of Flight Operations, Jordan said. Captain Holloway, set your parking brakes immediately. Do not push back. I repeat, set parking brakes. You have a critical mechanical failure on the nose gear assembly. Is this a joke? Holloway's voice blared back, dripping with incredulity. Is this that woman from the gate, Richard? Why is she on the mic? Jordan ignored the question. She turned to the window and watched the ground crew. The tug driver, hearing the unauthorized transmission, hesitated. He looked up at the cockpit. Ramp lead, Jordan said, addressing the ground crew directly through the channel. This is VP Banks. Disconnect the tow bar. Do not move this aircraft. If you move this aircraft 1 inch, you will be held liable for gross negligence. Look at the strut. Look at the fluid. The passengers at the window pressed their faces against the glass. Below, on the tarmac. The ramp lead. A guy in a neon yellow vest walked over to the nose gear. He shone his flashlight up into the wheel well. He froze. He wiped a finger on the strut, looked at it, and then frantically waved his arms in an X motion to the tug driver. He tapped his headset. Flight deck. The ramp lead's voice came over the radio, shaky but clear. Captain. She's right. You've got a serious leak here. It's pooling fast. We can't push. Inside the terminal, the crowd erupted, not in anger, but in shock. She was right, a businessman whispered. She actually knew. Jordan put the microphone down. She looked at Richard. He was pale, leaning against the back wall, looking like he might vomit. Unlock the jet bridge door, Jordan commanded. I can't, Richard whispered. Once the flight is closed, only the pilot can unlock the door. Richard, Jordan said, or I will have Officer Miller kick it down, and I will bill the repair cost to your pension fund. Richard typed the code. The magnetic lock clicked open. Jordan picked up her bag. Officer Miller, I'd appreciate an escort to the aircraft. It would be my honor, ma'am, Miller said, shooting a glare at Richard. As Jordan walked toward the door, the passengers parted like the Red Sea. They weren't looking at her with suspicion anymore. They were looking at her with awe. She wasn't just a passenger. She was the savior of Flight 441. The walk down the jet bridge felt different this time. Usually, it was a transition zone, a humid tunnel leading to work. Today, it was a corridor of judgment. The jet bridge operator had already re-extended the tunnel to the aircraft door. The loud thud of the bridge reconnecting with the fuselage echoed like a gavel strike. The aircraft door opened. The purser, a woman named Sarah who had been flying for 30 years, stood there, looking confused and flustered. "What is going on?" Sarah asked. "We were doing the safety demo. The passengers are freaking out. I'm sorry for the disruption, Sarah," Jordan said, stepping onto the plane. "I'm Captain Banks, the new VP of Ops. Is the flight deck door open?" Sarah's eyes widened. She spotted the ID around Jordan's neck. "Oh my God, you're the one who called the stop. Larry, Captain Holloway is furious. He's throwing things." He's about to be doing a lot more than that, Jordan said. Keep the passengers seated. Tell them it's a minor technical check and we are ensuring their safety. Jordan walked through the galley. The first-class passengers stared at her. Some recognized her from the gate. Is everything okay? A woman in 2B asked. Jordan stopped and smiled. It was a genuine, reassuring smile. Everything is fine now. We just caught something the computer missed. We'll get you on your way safely, or we'll get you a new plane. I promise. She reached the cockpit door. It was ajar. Inside, Captain Holloway was yelling at his first officer, a young man named Dave, who looked terrified. It's just condensation, Holloway was shouting, slamming his hand on the throttle quadrant. The seals are cold. They weep a little bit in Chicago winters. It's normal. We're going to lose our slot time because of some affirmative action higher thinking. She knows my plane better than I do. Captain Holloway, Jordan said. She didn't shout. She didn't have to. Her voice cut through the small, cramped space of the flight deck like a razor blade. Holloway spun around in his seat. His face was a map of burst capillaries. You have some nerve. You hijacked my radio frequency. That is a federal offense. I'm going to have you arrested the second we deplane. Actually, Jordan said, stepping into the cockpit and closing the door behind her so the passengers wouldn't hear. I'm relieving you of duty. You're what? Holloway laughed. You can't relieve me. I'm the pilot in command. Who do you think you are? I'm the person who signs your paychecks. Larry, Jordan said. And I'm the person who reads the maintenance logs. She reached past him and grabbed the thick, aluminum-bound logbook sitting on the center console. Hey, don't touch that! Holloway lunged for it, but Jordan was faster. She stepped back, opening the book. Let's see, Jordan said, scanning the pages. Date today. Pre-flight inspection. Checked by Captain L. Holloway. Status all systems nominal. No leaks observed. She looked up at him. You signed this 10 minutes ago. Because it was fine. Holloway lied. The leak must have just started. A leak of that magnitude doesn't just start as a puddle, Jordan said. That is a slow weep that has been building for hours. And if I look back... She flipped the page. Ah, here we are. 2 days ago. Inbound from Munich. A note from the previous crew. Nose gear, steering sluggish. Visible fluid residue on strut. Jordan tapped the paper. And what did you do? Larry, you didn't call maintenance. You didn't write it up to be fixed. You wrote, ground test satisfactory. Could not duplicate. She looked at him with disgust. You pencil-whipped it. You ignored a documented mechanical fault because you didn't want to wait for maintenance in Munich. And you didn't want to deal with it here because you wanted to get home. You put 300 people at risk to save yourself 2 hours. The color drained from Holloway's face. The first officer, Dave, looked down at his shoes. Dave, Jordan said softly. Did you see the leak during your walk around? Dave hesitated. He looked at Holloway, who was glaring at him. Dave, Jordan warned. This is your career. Right now, tell the truth. Yes, Dave whispered. I saw it. I told Larry. He said it was just hydraulic sweat, and if we wrote it up, we'd time out and miss the return leg. You traitor! Holloway hissed at Dave. That's enough, Jordan snapped. Get out of the seat. Larry. No, Holloway said, gripping the armrests. This is my plane. At that moment, the cockpit door opened again. Officer Miller stood there. Behind him was a man in a suit, the station manager, and 2 heavy-set airport police officers. Problem, Miss Banks, the station manager asked. He looked breathless. He had run all the way from the admin building. Captain Halloway is refusing to vacate the aircraft after being relieved for cause, Jordan said. He has also falsified federal aviation documents and attempted to operate an unairworthy aircraft. I'd like him removed. Halloway looked at the police. He looked at Jordan. He realized, finally, that the wall he had hit wasn't a girl at the gate. It was the end of the line. I want my union rep, Halloway muttered as he unbuckled his seatbelt. You're going to need a lawyer, not a rep, Jordan said. Halloway stood up. He grabbed his hat. He tried to muster some dignity, brushing past Jordan. You'll hear about this. I have seniority. Seniority doesn't cover negligence. Larry, Jordan said, goodbye. As Halloway was escorted off the plane, the first officer looked at Jordan, terrified. Am I fired too? Jordan looked at the young pilot. You should have stood up to him. Dave, you're the last line of defense, but I know how hard it is to go against a senior captain. You're suspended pending investigation. Go home. Dave nodded, grabbed his bag, and fled. Now, the cockpit was empty. The plane was leaderless. The passengers were waiting. Jordan sat down in the captain's seat. It was still warm. She looked at the instruments. She felt the familiar comfort of the controls. She picked up the PA mic. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Banks. I have some news. The cabin was silent. The drama of the police escorting the previous pilot off the plane had rippled through the rows like a shockwave. People were texting, tweeting, and whispering. We have identified a safety issue with the aircraft, Jordan announced, her voice steady and warm over the speakers. The previous crew has been relieved of duty. I want to be transparent with you. Safety is the only currency that matters at Sovereign Airways. We do not fly unless it is perfect. She paused. However, this means this plane is going nowhere tonight. The repair will take approximately 4 hours. A collective groan went through the cabin. But, Jordan continued, I have already authorized a spare aircraft. It is being towed to the adjacent gate, K-14, as we speak. I have also called in a fresh crew. And since I am already here, and I happen to be type-rated on the 777, she smiled to herself. I will be your captain for the flight to Paris tonight. Drinks are on the house in all cabins while we transfer. Thank you for your patience. The groan turned into applause. It started in the back and swept forward. They didn't care about the delay anymore. They felt safe. They felt like someone was actually in charge. Jordan put the mic down and turned to the open door where the lead mechanic, a guy named Smitty, was waiting with the logbook. You called it cap, Smitty said, shaking his head. Steering actuator seal is blown. If he had tried to take off, the vibration would have shattered the line. He would have lost all hydraulic pressure in System A. No nose gear steering, no normal brakes, no left thrust reverser. Catastrophic failure on landing, Jordan noted. Yeah, Smitty said grimly. He would have run off the runway in Paris. High-speed excursion. It would have been ugly. Jordan signed the logbook, grounding the aircraft formally. Pull the digital flight data recorder, she said. I want the sensor data from the last 3 flights. I want to prove exactly how long he's been ignoring this. You got it, Smitty said. By the way, Richard Sterling is outside. Is he? Jordan raised an eyebrow. Yeah. He's trying to talk to the station manager. Says he was just following orders. Jordan stood up. I think I need to have a little chat with Richard before we swap planes. She walked back up the jet bridge. The air in the terminal had changed. It was electric. Richard was standing near the podium, looking small. The station manager, Arthur's right-hand man in Chicago, was listening to him with crossed arms. When Richard saw Jordan emerge from the jet bridge, flanked by the mechanics, he straightened up. "Ms. Banks," Richard said, his voice trembling. "I was just explaining. The protocol. I didn't know who you were. It doesn't matter who I am." "Richard," Jordan said, stopping in front of him. The passengers who were deplaning were slowing down to watch. "That's the problem. You treated me like dirt because you thought I was nobody. You treated me like a criminal because of how I look. And you let a dangerous pilot bully you into ignoring safety protocols because he was your buddy." "I was just doing my job," Richard whined. "No," Jordan said. "Your job is to gatekeep for safety, not for your ego. You saw a valid ID and you threw it on the floor. You saw a concern and you mocked it." She turned to the station manager. "Revoke his cider badge. Immediately." "Wait! What?" Richard's panic-stricken eyes darted around. "You can't fire me. I have 20 years. "You're not just fired, Richard," Jordan said, her voice hard as steel. "I'm filing a formal complaint with the TSA regarding your interference with a federal flight crew member. You won't just lose your job. You will be permanently ineligible for employment at any airport in the United States." Richard fell back against the counter. "You can't do that." "I just did," Jordan said. "Escort him out." As security stepped forward to take Richard's badge, Jordan's phone buzzed. It was a text from Arthur, the COO. It was a link to Twitter. The video of the incident at the gate, Richard throwing her ID. Jordan, calm and collected, had already hit 2 million views. The hashtag Captain Jordan was trending, but the real twist was yet to come. Because, while Richard and Holloway were done, the rot at the airline went deeper than just 2 men, and Jordan was about to find out that Holloway wasn't just lazy. He was being paid to cut corners. The flight to Paris on the replacement 777 was uneventful, which was exactly how Jordan liked it. The air at 39,000 feet was smooth. The engines hummed a steady rhythm, and the passengers back in the cabin slept the sleep of the relieved. But in the cockpit, the atmosphere was intense. Jordan wasn't sleeping. While the relief first officer managed the radios, Jordan had her iPad propped up on the yoke. She wasn't watching a movie. She was deep into the raw data transmitted by Smitty, the lead mechanic back in O'Hare. Smitty had pulled the digital flight data recorder, DFDR info, from Holloway's grounded plane. The data told a horrifying story in binary code. The hydraulic leak hadn't started on the ground in Chicago. The sensor data showed a slow drop in hydraulic pressure in System A starting 4 flights ago. 4 times. Holloway had taken off knowing his bird was bleeding essential fluid. 4 times. He had ignored the cockpit warnings, likely pulling the circuit breaker to silence the alarm so the first officer wouldn't panic. But as Jordan scrolled through the flight logs, cross-referencing them with the company's internal payroll and scheduling server access her new VP status, granted her she found something even worse. Something that made the hair on her arms stand up. It wasn't just laziness. It was a pattern. She looked at Holloway's fuel loads for the past 6 months. On international flights, regulations required a specific amount of contingency fuel enough to circle for 45 minutes, plus enough to reach an alternate airport if the destination was socked in with weather. Holloway had been consistently flying with the bare legal minimum, sometimes even dipping slightly below it, relying on tailwinds that might not exist. Why would a senior captain, a man with a pension to protect, take such insane risks flying a leaky plane with minimum fuel across the Atlantic? Then she found the memo. It was buried deep in a subfolder on the corporate server, marked Executive Eyes Only. It was dated 8 months prior, sent from the office of Sterling Croft, the Chief Financial Officer of Sovereign Airways. The subject line, Operational Efficiency Incentive Program. Jordan opened the document. It was couched in corporate speak, phrases like maximizing shareholder value and reducing overhead drag. But the core message was brutally simple. The airline was offering a quarterly cash bonus, substantial ones, in the 5-figure range to the top 10% of captains who achieved the best on-time performance and fuel savings metrics. In translation, if you didn't delay flights for maintenance, and if you flew with lighter fuel loads to save gas money, the company gave you a kickback. Holloway wasn't just a bad pilot. He was a mercenary. He was trading safety margins for cash bonuses. He was gambling 300 lives against a $20,000 check from Sterling Croft. Jordan felt sick. The corruption wasn't just at the gate with Richard Sterling, or in the cockpit with Holloway. It was rotting the company from the C-suite down. Arthur Pendleton, the CEO who hired her, was a good man, an operations guy, but he had let the finance sociopaths take over the culture. Holloway had been desperate to get off the gate in Chicago, not just because he was impatient, but because a maintenance delay would have knocked him out of the running for his quarterly bonus. Jordan took a screenshot of the memo. She encrypted the file and emailed it to her personal, secure server as the sun began to rise over the Irish Sea, painting the clouds beneath them in shades of fire and rose. Jordan knew that landing in Paris was just the beginning. The real turbulence would hit when she got back to corporate headquarters. She wasn't just going to fire Holloway. She was going to take down the entire system that created him. The executive conference room on the 40th floor of the Sovereign Airways headquarters in downtown Chicago offered a panoramic view of the city. But the atmosphere inside was colder than the wind whipping off Lake Michigan. The room was a sanctuary of glass, chrome, and polished mahogany, a world away from the grease, hydraulic fluid, and freezing tarmac where the airline's actual work took place. At the head of the table sat Arthur Pendleton, the CEO. He looked diminished, his face grey and drawn, the look of a man who had lost control of his own ship. To his right sat Sterling Croft, the chief financial officer. Croft was the polar opposite, relaxed, leaning back in his Eames chair, checking his watch as if this emergency meeting was merely a scheduling inconvenience. He wore a bespoke Italian suit that cost more than a ramp agent made in a year. Arthur, really? Croft sighed, tapping his manicured fingers on the table. We are overreacting. We had a mechanical issue in Chicago. It happens. We put out a press release, offered the passengers travel vouchers, and the stock is down less than 0.5%. The market doesn't care about a leaky strut. The market cares about margins. The market might not care. Sterling, Arthur said, his voice trembling slightly. But the FAA does, and Jordan Banks does. Captain Banks, Croft sneered, saying the title like it was a slur. She's been in the VP role for 3 weeks, and she thinks she's running a crusade. You need to rein her in. Arthur. She grounded a transatlantic flight over a puddle. Do you know what that cost us in rebooking fees alone? I know exactly what it cost. A voice cut through the air. The heavy double doors swung open. Jordan Banks walked in. She wasn't wearing the business casual blazer she had worn at the gate 2 days ago. Today, she was in her full captain's uniform, 4 gold stripes on the epaulets, the wings gleaming on her chest, her hat tucked precisely under her left arm. She carried a thick, leather-bound portfolio. She didn't sit down. She walked to the end of the table and stood there, staring directly at Croft. "It cost $140,000 in vouchers and maintenance," Jordan said, her voice steady and echoing in the silent room. "A significant sum, but let's discuss the alternative cost, shall we? The cost of a Boeing 777 cartwheeling off the runway at Charles de Gaulle because it had no nose gear steering." Croft waved a hand dismissively. "Hyperbole. Holloway is a senior pilot. He would have managed—" "Holloway is a gambler," Jordan corrected, throwing the portfolio onto the table. It slid across the polished wood and stopped inches from Arthur's hands. "And you're the house." Arthur opened the portfolio. His eyes widened as he scanned the first document. It was a printout of the raw sensor data from the digital flight data recorder of Flight 441. "What am I looking at?" Arthur asked. "You're looking at a smoking gun," Jordan explained, stepping closer. "That data shows the hydraulic pressure in System A dropping progressively over 4 consecutive flights." Holloway knew. The sensors screamed at him. But he didn't log it. He didn't call maintenance. He reset the breaker and kept flying. "Bad pilot," Croft shrugged. "So we fire him. Case closed." "Turn the page, Arthur," Jordan commanded. Arthur flipped the page. He gasped. It was a confidential internal memo, dated 8 months prior. The header read, "Office of the CFO, Strategic Incentive Initiative." Jordan pointed at the document. "That is the Efficiency Bonus Program, a scheme authorized by you, Sterling. It offers a quarterly cash bonus $15,000 to captains who maintain a 98% on-time departure rate and who consistently fly with minimum contingency fuel." Jordan looked at Croft with disgust. "You created a financial incentive for pilots to ignore safety. If Holloway had reported that leak, the delay would have disqualified him from the bonus. If he had taken extra fuel for the drag caused by the leak, he would have missed his target. He wasn't flying a plane. Sterling. He was chasing a check." Croft stood up, his face flushing red. "I did what was necessary to save this company. Do you have any idea what fuel costs? Do you know the overhead we carry? I trimmed the fat. I made us profitable." "You monetized negligence," Jordan shot back. "You put a price tag on human lives. 300 people almost died because Larry Holloway wanted 15 grand and you wanted a better quarterly report." "You can't prove intent," Croft scoffed, adjusting his tie. "This is all circumstantial. Any lawyer will tear this apart. You have no authority here. Captain, I am the CFO. I answer to the board, not to the VP of Ops." "I knew you'd say that," Jordan said, a small, cold smile touching her lips. "Which is why I didn't come here to convince you." She pulled her phone from her pocket and placed it on the table. The screen was glowing. "I'm not the only one listening to this meeting, Sterling." The large monitor on the conference room wall flickered to life. It wasn't a PowerPoint presentation, it was a live video feed. A man in a windbreaker with FBI emblazoned in yellow letters on the back was standing in the Sovereign Airways lobby. 40 floors below, beside him was a woman in a sharp suit, the regional director of the FAA. "Mr. Croft," the woman on the screen said, her voice amplified through the conference room speakers. "This is Director Reynolds from the Federal Aviation Administration. We have been listening to this feed for the last 10 minutes, per an agreement with Captain Banks under the Federal Whistleblower Protection Act. We have also received the encrypted files regarding your efficiency bonus scheme." Croft's face drained of color. He looked from the screen to Jordan, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. You wore a wire," Croft whispered. "We live in a digital age. "Sterling," Jordan said. "I streamed it." The FBI agent on the screen spoke into his radio. "Move in." Seconds later, the elevator doors in the hallway pinged. Heavy footsteps thundered down the corridor. The conference room doors burst open, and 4 federal agents swarmed the room. "Sterling Croft," the lead agent announced, holding up a badge. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, reckless endangerment of a mass transportation vehicle, and violation of federal aviation safety statutes. Stand up and place your hands behind your back." As the cuffs clicked onto Croft's wrists, a harsh, metallic sound that seemed to signal the end of an era, he looked at Jordan with pure, unadulterated hatred. "You destroyed this company," he hissed. "No," Jordan said, watching him being dragged away. "I just grounded the liability." The fallout from the Sovereign scandal was swift, brutal, and total. It was a cleansing fire that burned through the ranks of the airline, leaving no stone unturned. Captain Larry Halloway felt the impact first. The FAA didn't just suspend him, they made an example of him. His airline transport pilot license was permanently revoked. He was stripped of his pension due to the gross negligence clause in his contract. The last anyone heard of the man who once treated the cockpit like his personal throne. He was working as a night shift dispatcher for a trucking company in Gary, Indiana. He spent his nights in a fluorescent-lit cubicle, earning slightly above minimum wage, telling drivers where to park. He died a few years later, bitter and alone, a man who had traded his legacy for a bonus he never even received. Richard Sterling, the gate agent, faced a different kind of justice social exile. The video of him throwing Jordan's ID on the floor and mocking her appearance went beyond viral. It became a case study. It was played on news networks, in diversity training seminars, and on YouTube commentary channels for years. He was fired, obviously, but the internet never forgets. He couldn't get a job at a grocery store, let alone an airport. Every time he applied for work, a quick Google search of his name brought up the video of his sneering face. He was forced to move back to his hometown in rural Ohio, living in his sister's basement, forever the face of petty tyranny. He had tried to be a gatekeeper, and in the end, he found every gate closed to him. Sterling Croft fared the worst. The efficiency bonus memo was the nail in his coffin. The federal prosecutors didn't hold back. He was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison for his role in the scheme. The class action lawsuit filed by the passengers of the endangered flights, totaling nearly $40 million, decimated his personal fortune. His yacht, his penthouse, his bespoke suits, all seized to pay the settlement. He went from the boardroom to a 6x8 cell, where efficiency took on a very different, much grimmer meaning. And Jordan Banks. 6 months after the arrest, the atmosphere at O'Hare Terminal 3 had transformed. Jordan walked through the terminal, once again in civilian clothes, conducting a surprise inspection. But this time, there was no tension. The staff at the counters were smiling, but they were also focused. She stopped at gate K12, the same gate where Richard had tried to block her. A young gate agent, a man named David, was dealing with an irate passenger who was demanding to board a flight that had already closed. "I understand your frustration, sir," David said firmly but politely. "But safety protocols dictate that once the door is closed, we cannot reopen it. I can rebook you on the next flight. But I cannot breach security procedure," the passenger yelled. "Do you know who I am?" David didn't flinch. He pointed to a small plaque on the counter. It was a new addition, present at every Sovereign Airways gate now. It read, "Safety is our only priority." "I know who you are, sir," David said, "but my boss is Captain Jordan Banks, and in this airline, her rules trump your status." The passenger huffed, defeated, and walked away. Jordan smiled. She didn't intervene. She didn't need to. The culture had shifted. The fear was gone, replaced by pride. She walked to the window and looked out at the tarmac. A Boeing 787 was pushing back, the sun glinting off its wings. It was clean, it was safe, and it was on time, not because someone cut corners, but because the crew worked as a team. Jordan took a deep breath. Watching the plane taxi toward the runway, she had won. Not just the lawsuit, and not just the job, she had won the war for the soul of the airline. She pulled out her phone and sent a quick text to Arthur Pendleton. "Gate K-12 is clear. Operations normal. We're good to go." She turned and walked away, the sound of jet engines roaring in the distance like a song of victory. Talk about a crash landing for the bad guys. It's terrifying to think that a corporate suit like Sterling Croft could value a quarterly bonus over hundreds of human lives. But history has shown us it happens more than we'd like to admit. Jordan Banks didn't just save those passengers. She saved the integrity of the profession. She reminded everyone that in aviation, there are no shortcuts, only safe arrivals or tragic endings. It's a brutal lesson in Karma Holloway lost his wings. Richard lost his dignity, and Croft lost his freedom. Meanwhile, Jordan proved that true power isn't about bullying people at a gate. It's about having the competence and the courage to do the right thing when it costs you everything. If you enjoyed this deep dive into airline scandals and justice served, please hit that like button. It helps the algorithm find more people who need to hear these stories. Share this video with your friends, especially anyone who travels often. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. We have a massive story coming next week about a nurse who exposed a hospital billing scam, and you won't want to miss it. Until next time, keep your eyes open, stand your ground, and fly safe.